The alarm clock rang at 5:30 in the morning, just like every day for the past 3 years. Isabella Crawford rubbed her tired eyes and jumped out of the narrow bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor of the small apartment. The musty smell that insisted on permeating the walls didn't even bother her anymore, or at least that's what she told herself every morning. "Another day, another chance," she murmured to the cracked bathroom mirror, pulling her chestnut hair into a simple ponytail. Her hands, calloused from so much work, trembled slightly when she picked up her toothbrush. It wasn't nervousness. It was pure, accumulated exhaustion. Isabella worked at 3 different places: mornings as a cleaner in a commercial building, afternoons as a waitress at a downtown cafe, and some nights as an elderly caregiver. All of this to maintain the small apartment she had inherited from her grandmother, the last piece of family she had left in the world. At 7 o'clock sharp, she was sweeping the lobby of the Manhattan Corporate Building, a mirrored skyscraper where men and women in expensive suits passed by her as if she were invisible. Isabella didn't mind. Actually, she preferred it that way. Fewer complications, less chance of someone discovering she could no longer pay the bills. "Bella, you need to see this!" The shrill voice of Margaret, the head janitor, echoed through the hallway. Isabella ran to the break room where Margaret was holding an official letter with the golden seal of a law firm. "This arrived for you this morning. Looks important," said Margaret, with that typical curiosity of someone who lives for other people's gossip. With trembling hands, Isabella opened the envelope. The words danced before her eyes for a moment, until the cruel reality crystallized. "Dear Miss Crawford, we inform you that the deadline for settlement of the mortgage regarding the property located at 142 Rose Street, Apt 3B, expired 90 days ago. According to contractual clause, the new owner of said debt, Mr. Alexander Blackstone, requests full payment of $47,000 by the 15th of this month, under penalty of immediate foreclosure of the property. Sincerely, Drummond and Associates Law Firm." The paper slipped from her hands like a dry autumn leaf. $47,000 in 2 weeks. Isabella felt the world spinning around her. "What happened, honey? You turned white as paper." Margaret grabbed her arm firmly. I need to go," Isabella stammered, collecting her cleaning materials with mechanical movements. "I need to solve something urgent." The rest of the morning passed like a blur. Isabella could barely concentrate on work, making small mistakes she would normally never make. When she arrived at Aroma Cafe, where she worked in the afternoon, she was still in shock. "You look like you've seen a ghost," commented Roberto, the cafe owner, a 60-year-old Italian man who treated her like a daughter. "Sit down. I'll make you a strong coffee." Isabella collapsed into the employee break room chair, finally allowing tears to stream down her face. Roberto discreetly pretended to be busy organizing cups while she composed herself. "Mr. Roberto, do you know any lawyer who works with lost causes?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Bambina, every case has a solution. Tell old Roberto what's happening." And Isabella told him about the debt her grandmother had contracted in her last months of life to pay for medical treatment, about how she assumed responsibility without knowing the amount had been sold to a third party, about how working 18 hours a day still wasn't enough to gather $47,000 in 2 weeks. "This Alexander Blackstone," Roberto murmured, frowning. "I've heard that name. Not a good thing, Bambina. He buys debts from desperate people and then charges with absurd interest." "What am I going to do?" Isabella whispered. "If I lose the apartment, I have nowhere to go. It's all I have left of my grandmother." Roberto remained silent for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to his office. You're going to try to negotiate a longer deadline, maybe installments. And if he doesn't want to listen," Roberto made a dramatic pause, "you're going to make that abandoned puppy face of yours that no stone heart can resist." Despite all the anguish, Isabella managed a weak smile. Roberto always managed to extract a little hope from any situation, no matter how desperate. "And if it doesn't work, then we improvise. Italians always have a plan B, C, D," he said, winking. That night, after taking care of Mrs. Albertine, an 80-year-old lady who loved telling stories about her youth, Isabella returned home exhausted. She sat in the small armchair that had belonged to her grandmother and picked up the framed portrait that sat on the side table. "Grandma, I don't know what to do," she murmured to the black and white photograph. You always knew how to find a way out of everything. Give me some strength from wherever you are. The tiny apartment suddenly seemed even smaller. The peeling walls, the ceiling with moisture stains, the constantly dripping sink. All of this was her entire world. Without it, she would be just another aimless person in the big city. Isabella spent the entire night awake, mentally rehearsing what she would say to Alexander Blackstone. She would be polite, but firm. She would explain her situation, show that she was hard-working and honest. She would ask for a chance, a longer deadline, anything to prevent her from losing the last piece of family she had left. When the sun rose, painting the sky a soft orange, Isabella took a quick shower and put on her best outfit, a black skirt and white blouse she had bought on sale 2 years ago. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. At 8 o'clock in the morning, she stood in front of the Empire Building, a glass and steel colossus that rose imposingly in the heart of the financial district. On the 42nd floor was Alexander Blackstone's office. The elevator rose in silence, and Isabella felt her stomach churn with each passing floor. When the doors opened, she found herself before a luxurious reception area, with Italian marble on the floor and artwork on the walls. "I have an appointment with Mr. I. Blackstone," she said to the blonde and impeccable receptionist, who looked her up and down with barely disguised disdain. "Name? Isabella Crawford." The woman typed something on the computer with perfectly manicured nails and sighed with impatience. "There's no appointment under Isabella Crawford, but I need to speak with him about the Rose Street mortgage. It's urgent. Mr. Blackstone doesn't see anyone without a prior appointment. If you want to schedule a consultation, the first availability is in 3 weeks. Isabella felt desperation take hold of her chest. 3 weeks would be too late. "Please, it's just 5 minutes. I promise I won't take much of his time." "Miss, I've already explained the rules. If you don't have an appointment, there's nothing to be done." At that moment, a glass door opened and a man came out walking with long, determined steps. Tall, with perfectly styled black hair, wearing a suit that cost more than Isabella's annual salary. He was talking on his cell phone with a grave and authoritative voice. "I don't accept excuses, Patterson. Either you deliver the reports by 5 o'clock or you can look for another job," he said, without even looking around. Isabella instantly knew that was Alexander Blackstone. There was something in the way he moved, as if the entire world existed only to serve him, that screamed power and arrogance. Without thinking twice, she got up from the chair and walked toward him. "Mr. Blackstone! Mr. Blackstone, please!" He stopped abruptly and hung up the phone, turning to face her with eyes of the purest blue-gray she had ever seen. For a moment, Isabella forgot why she was even there. "Who the hell are you? And what do you want with me?" His voice was cold as ice. I'm Isabella Crawford. About the Rose Street mortgage. I need to talk to you." Alexander examined her from head to toe with a look that made her feel even smaller than she already felt. "Ah, yes. The little woman who owes $47,000 and thinks she can make me waste time with tears and pleas." He crossed his arms, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Let me guess. You're going to tell me a touching story about how hard your life is, how you need more time, how you'll pay in small installments for the next 50 years. Sir, I just need a chance to explain." "Explain what?" "That your grandmother was irresponsible and took on a debt she couldn't pay. That now you want me to be your savior and accept crumbs while I could have my money back by selling that miserable apartment?" Each word was like a slap in Isabella's face. She felt her cheeks burning with humiliation, but forced herself to maintain composure. "My grandmother wasn't irresponsible. She was sick and—" "I'm not interested," he cut her off brutally. "Business is business. You have until the 15th to pay, or you'll receive a visit from the sheriff's officers. And believe me, they won't be as polite as I'm being." "Polite?" The words came out before Isabella could control herself. "You call this polite?" Alexander arched an eyebrow, clearly amused by her reaction. "Ah, the kitten has claws," he said sarcastically. "But claws don't pay debts, sweetheart. Money pays debts." The receptionist, who had watched the entire scene with morbid interest, decided to intervene. "Mr. Blackstone, Mr. Hamilton has arrived for the 10 o'clock meeting." "Perfect," said Alexander, already turning to leave. "Miss Crawford, it was a pleasure meeting you. Don't forget, 15 days. Isabella stood in the middle of the luxurious lobby, feeling small and humiliated. Tears threatened to overflow, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. That's when she saw the silver coffee pot on a side table, with finest porcelain cups arranged beside it. An insane idea crossed her mind. "Mr. Blackstone!" she shouted. He turned, impatient. "What now?" Isabella picked up a cup of hot coffee, very hot, and walked toward him with determined steps. "This here," she said, "is for my grandmother." And before anyone could react, she threw the entire contents of the cup onto Alexander Blackstone's impeccable white shirt. The silence that followed was absolute. Coffee dripped down his expensive shirt, staining his suit and dripping onto the marble floor. The receptionist let out a little scream of horror. Some employees who had witnessed the scene were speechless. Alexander looked at his own shirt, then at Isabella, then back at his shirt. His blue-gray eyes gleamed with something she couldn't identify. Anger? Surprise? Or could it be admiration? "Interesting," he finally murmured. "Very interesting." Isabella dropped the empty cup on the table and walked toward the elevator with all the dignity she could muster. Her legs were shaking, but she kept her head high. "Miss Crawford," Alexander's deep voice echoed behind her. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Or, he paused for what seemed like an eternity. "The smartest move I've ever seen a woman make." The elevator doors closed before she could see the expression on his face. But as she descended the 42 floors, Isabella had the strange feeling that she had just changed the course of her life forever. What she didn't know was that, up there, Alexander Blackstone stood for a full 5 minutes, looking at the closed elevator doors, with a slow and dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Patterson," he said to the assistant who ran to help him with his wet shirt, "cancel all my appointments for today, and I want all information about Isabella Crawford on my desk in 1 hour." "Sir, you heard me. I want to know everything about her. Where she works, where she studied, who she associates with. Everything." As he walked to his office, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about the green eyes of that woman when she threw coffee on him. There was fire there, courage, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time, a genuine challenge. For years, people bowed before him, begged, flattered, tried to buy his approval. But she had thrown coffee on him, hot coffee, in front of everyone. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander Blackstone felt truly alive. On the other side of town, Isabella arrived at Aroma Cafe with hands still shaking and an absolute certainty that she had signed her own death sentence. But even so, she couldn't regret what she had done. For the first time in her life, she had stood up to a bully, and that, whatever the cost, was priceless. Alexander Blackstone stood in his marble bathroom, staring at his reflection, while his personal tailor fussed over the coffee-stained shirt. For 34 years, no one had dared to challenge him. Not his business partners, not his employees, certainly not some desperate woman begging for mercy. Yet here he was, unable to stop thinking about emerald eyes filled with righteous fury. "Sir, perhaps we should press charges." Patterson, his assistant, hovered nervously by the door. "Assault, property damage." "No." Alexander's voice was sharp, final. "Find out everything about Isabella Crawford. I want to know what makes her tick." 2 hours later, Patterson returned with a manila folder thick with information. Alexander dismissed his tailor and opened the file, expecting to find the usual sob story of financial ruin and poor choices. What he found instead made him pause. Isabella Crawford, 26. Orphaned at 16 when her parents died in a car accident. Raised by her grandmother, Elena Crawford, a retired nurse who had mortgaged her apartment to pay for Isabella's community college tuition. No criminal record, no debt history, until the medical bills started piling up during Elena's final battle with cancer. Alexander flipped through bank statements, employment records, medical bills. The numbers painted a picture of someone drowning slowly, working multiple jobs just to keep her head above water. 3 jobs, 18-hour days, every penny going toward her grandmother's treatment or basic survival. "Interesting," he murmured, studying a photo of Isabella at her high school graduation. Even then, those green eyes held determination that reminded him of someone he'd once known, someone he'd tried very hard to forget. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Blackstone, your 2 o'clock appointment is here. Cancel it." Alexander stood, straightening his new shirt. Patterson, prepare the car. We're going for a drive. Isabella's hands shook as she served coffee to the afternoon rush at Aroma Cafe. Every time the bell above the door chimed, she expected to see police officers coming to arrest her. Or worse, Alexander Blackstone himself, coming to gloat before destroying her life completely. "Bella, you're spilling more coffee than you're serving," Roberto observed, gently taking the pot from her hands. "What happened this morning?" Before Isabella could answer, the cafe fell silent. She looked up to see every customer staring toward the entrance, where Alexander Blackstone stood like a dark storm cloud in an expensive coat. He surveyed the modest cafe with those calculating blue-gray eyes, taking in the mismatched chairs, the chipped paint, the handwritten menu board. His gaze finally settled on Isabella, and she saw something that made her stomach flip. Not anger, but curiosity. "Miss Crawford," his voice carried across the silent cafe. "We need to talk." Roberto stepped forward, his Italian accent thickening with protective anger. "You want to talk to my girl? You do it with respect, capiche?" Alexander's eyebrow arched slightly. "Your girl? Isabella is like daughter to me. You want to threaten her? You deal with me first." For a moment, Alexander studied the older man with something that might have been respect. Then his attention returned to Isabella, who had found her voice. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her hands. "Say whatever you came to say right here." "Very well." Alexander moved closer, and Isabella caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine. "I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in your propositions. You will be interested in this one." His smile was sharp as a blade. "I'll give you a way to save your apartment and pay off your debt, completely." The cafe remained dead silent, customers forgotten as everyone strained to hear. Isabella felt Roberto's protective presence beside her, but her focus was entirely on the dangerous man in front of her. "What's the catch?" she whispered. "Smart girl. The catch is simple. You work for me." "Doing what?" Alexander's smile widened, and Isabella realized with growing alarm that she'd walked straight into a trap. "You'll be my personal assistant. For 6 months. You'll live in my penthouse, be available 24 hours a day, attend business dinners, social events, whatever I require. In exchange, I'll pay off your debt and give you a generous salary." "You're insane." The words escaped before Isabella could stop them. "I won't be my what, Miss Crawford?" His voice dropped to a dangerous purr. "What exactly do you think I'm proposing?" Isabella's face burned with embarrassment and anger. "I know exactly what men like you want from women like me." "Men like me?" Alexander stepped closer, his voice soft but deadly. "And what kind of man am I, Isabella?" The use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. She forced herself to meet his gaze, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Rich, powerful, used to getting whatever you want, whenever you want it. You probably think you can buy me like you buy everything else. Can I?" The question hung between them, loaded with challenge and something darker. Isabella felt the weight of every gaze in the cafe, Roberto's protective tension, her own desperate need warring with her pride. "No," she said firmly. "You can't. Then you'll lose your apartment." Alexander shrugged, as if discussing the weather. "I'll foreclose on Monday. You'll be homeless by the end of the week." "Alexander Blackstone," Roberto exploded, stepping between them. "You are not welcome in my cafe. Get out." "Actually," Alexander said calmly, pulling out his phone, "I think you'll find that as of this morning, I own this building. The landlord was quite eager to sell when I made an offer he couldn't refuse." Isabella felt the world tilt sideways. "You... what?" "I own your apartment building too, by the way, and the office building where you work mornings." Alexander's smile was predatory now. "Interesting how quickly people sell when the price is right." "You can't do this," Isabella breathed. "I can do whatever I want. That's what having money means, Isabella. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The cafe erupted in angry murmurs, customers shocked by the display of raw power. But Isabella barely heard them. All she could see were those blue-gray eyes watching her, with something that might have been admiration. 6 months, she said quietly. 6 months. And then you'll leave me alone? Forever? If that's what you want. Alexander's voice was soft, almost gentle, though I suspect you might change your mind. Isabella looked at Roberto, saw the helpless fury in his eyes, the way his hands clenched into fists. She thought of her grandmother's apartment, of Mrs. Albertine who depended on her care, of all the people who would suffer if Alexander decided to destroy everything she touched. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. Alexander straightened his coat. 9 o'clock. My office. Don't be late, Isabella. I hate waiting. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Isabella? Pack light. Where we're going, you won't need those old clothes. The door chimed as he left, but the silence that followed was deafening. Isabella stared at the space where he'd stood, wondering if she'd just agreed to save her life or sell her soul. Roberto's hand squeezed her shoulder. Bambina, you don't have to do this. Isabella looked around the cafe at all the worried faces, thought of everyone who depended on this place, on her jobs, on the life she'd built from nothing. Yes, she whispered, I do. But as she watched Alexander's black sedan disappear into traffic, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just challenged a dragon to a game she didn't know how to play, and the dragon was smiling. Isabella stood before the Empire Building at exactly 8:55 a.m., clutching a worn duffel bag that contained her entire life. She'd barely slept, spending the night staring at her grandmother's photograph and wondering if Elena would be proud or horrified by what she was about to do. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. This time, the blonde receptionist's smirk was even more pronounced. Mr. Blackstone is expecting you, she said with barely concealed glee. Conference room A. Isabella followed the directions down a hallway lined with abstract paintings that probably cost more than most people's homes. She paused outside the glass-walled conference room, where Alexander sat reading financial reports, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. He glanced up as she entered, those blue-gray eyes tracking her movement with predatory focus. Punctual. I like that. He gestured to a chair across from him. Sit. I'm not a dog, Isabella snapped, then immediately regretted the outburst. She needed this arrangement to work, no matter how much it galled her. Alexander's lips curved in what might have been amusement. No, you're definitely not a dog. Dogs are obedient. Isabella sat stiffly, placing her bag beside the chair. Let's get this over with. What exactly do you expect from me? Direct, also refreshing. Alexander closed his laptop and leaned back. First, we need to discuss your wardrobe situation. Isabella looked down at her simple black dress, the same one she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral. It was clean, pressed, and appropriate. What's wrong with my clothes? Nothing, if you're planning to serve coffee for the rest of your life. Alexander's tone was clinical, detached. But as my assistant, you'll be attending board meetings, charity galas, business dinners. You'll need to look the part. Before Isabella could respond, the conference room door opened, and a woman in her 50s glided in. She was immaculately dressed in cream-colored silk, with steel-gray hair pulled into an elegant chignon. Isabella Crawford. Meet Victoria Sterling, my stylist, Alexander said. Victoria, this is your new project. Victoria circled Isabella like a shark scenting blood, her sharp eyes cataloging every flaw. Good bone structure. Decent height. Those eyes are striking. But my God, Alexander, what have you brought me? Isabella's face burned. I'm sitting right here. Yes, and sitting terribly. Shoulders back, chin up. Never let them see you apologize for taking up space. Victoria's voice was brisk, but not unkind. We have a lot of work to do. I don't need a makeover, Isabella protested. I just need a job. Alexander leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous purr. Isabella, let me be very clear. For the next 6 months, you belong to me. Your appearance, your behavior, your very existence reflects on my company. You will do as I say when I say it without question. Is that understood? The word belong sent an unexpected thrill through Isabella that she immediately suppressed. You don't own me, don't I? Alexander's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I own your apartment, your job, your entire future. The only question is whether you make this easy or difficult. Victoria cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should start with measurements. I have a private suite upstairs. Isabella wanted to refuse, wanted to grab her pathetic little bag and walk out with whatever dignity she had left. But then she thought of Roberto's worried face, of Mrs. Albertine counting on her care, of all the lives that would be disrupted if she failed. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, "but I'm not changing who I am." Alexander's laugh was low and dangerous. "Oh, Isabella, you have no idea who you really are yet." 2 hours later, Isabella barely recognized herself in Victoria's full-length mirror. Gone was the simple black dress, replaced by a tailored navy suit that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair had been styled into soft waves, and subtle makeup enhanced her natural features. "Much better," Victoria approved, "though she still looks like she wants to murder someone." Probably me," Alexander said from the doorway, where he'd been watching the transformation with unreadable eyes. "How do you feel, Isabella?" Isabella stared at her reflection, seeing a woman she didn't recognize. Confident, polished, beautiful even. It terrified her. "Like I'm wearing a costume," she admitted. "Good, that's exactly what it is." Alexander stepped closer, and Isabella caught that intoxicating scent of cologne and danger. "The question is, who do you want to pretend to be?" "Someone who doesn't need your help," Isabella shot back. "But you do need my help. That's what makes this so interesting." Alexander's fingers brushed against her shoulder as he adjusted her jacket collar, the touch burning through the expensive fabric. "Your first test is tonight, the Worthington Foundation Gala. You'll be my date." Isabella spun around, nearly colliding with his chest. "Your date? That wasn't part of the deal." "Everything is part of the deal, Isabella. I told you. You belong to me now." His voice was soft, but steel hard. "The question is whether you're brave enough to handle it. I threw coffee on you yesterday. I think we've established I'm not lacking in courage." "No," Alexander agreed, his eyes darkening. "You're definitely not lacking in courage. But tonight you'll meet people who eat girls like you for breakfast. Are you ready for that?" Isabella lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "Bring it on." Alexander's smile was slow and dangerous. "Careful what you wish for, Isabella Crawford. You might just get it." As he walked away, Isabella caught her reflection again in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was stronger, more confident than the one who'd entered this room. But she was also playing with fire, and Alexander Blackstone was the flame that threatened to consume everything she thought she knew about herself. Victoria watched the exchange with knowing eyes. "Word of advice, dear. That man has destroyed stronger women than you. Don't let him break you before you figure out how to break him first." Isabella's eyes narrowed as she watched Alexander's retreating form through the glass wall. "Who says I'm planning to let him break me at all?" "Now that," Victoria smiled, "is exactly the right attitude. But be careful, Isabella. Alexander Blackstone doesn't just play games, he wins them, and losers in his world don't just lose money." "What do they lose?" Victoria's expression grew serious. "Everything that matters. Their hearts, their souls, their very sense of self. Don't underestimate him, dear. He's more dangerous than you know." As Isabella prepared for a night that would change everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's warning had come too late. She was already falling into Alexander's web, and the most terrifying part was that a small, reckless part of her wanted to see what would happen when she hit the bottom. The Worthington Foundation Gala was everything Isabella had imagined high society would be, and worse. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over a sea of designer gowns and tuxedos, while servers in white gloves glided between guests carrying champagne that cost more than Isabella's monthly salary. She stood at the edge of the grand ballroom in a midnight blue gown that Victoria had insisted brought out her eyes, feeling like an imposter among the city's elite. The dress was breathtaking, silk that flowed like water, with delicate beadwork that caught the light with every movement, but it felt like armor for a battle she wasn't sure she could win. "Breathe," Alexander murmured beside her, his hand settling possessively on her lower back. "You look like you're about to bolt." "Maybe because I am," Isabella whispered back, hyper-aware of his touch through the thin silk. "These people aren't my world, Alexander. Tonight, they are." His voice was low, meant only for her. "And you belong here more than you know." Before Isabella could ask what he meant, a vision in red silk approached them with the predatory grace of a lioness. She was stunning in the way that only came from perfect genetics and unlimited resources. Platinum blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and a smile that never quite reached those calculating orbs. "Alexander, darling," she purred, air kissing his cheeks while her gaze remained fixed on Isabella. I was wondering when you'd show up with your latest project. Isabella felt Alexander's hand tighten almost imperceptibly against her back. Vivian, he said coolly. Isabella Crawford. Meet Vivian Ashford. Vivian and I have history. The way he said history made Isabella's stomach clench with unexpected jealousy. Vivian's smile sharpened as if she'd sensed the reaction. Oh, we have much more than history, don't we, darling? Vivian's laugh was like tinkling glass. Tell me, Isabella, how are you enjoying your arrangement with Alexander? I do hope you're not getting too attached. He has such a short attention span. I wouldn't know, Isabella replied evenly, channeling every lesson in dignity her grandmother had taught her. We're focused on business, not history. How refreshing. A woman who knows her place. Vivian's tone was poison wrapped in silk. Though I have to ask, what exactly are your qualifications for this position? Besides serving coffee, of course. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, Alexander stepped forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous register she was beginning to know too well. Careful, Vivian. Isabella has qualities you could never understand. Such as? Vivian's eyebrow arched elegantly. Alexander's eyes never left Vivian's face, but Isabella felt his attention like a physical touch. Integrity, courage, the ability to surprise me. Something flickered in Vivian's perfect composure. How quaint. Well, do enjoy your evening. I'm sure it will be educational. As Vivian glided away, Isabella turned to Alexander. Old girlfriend, ex-fiancé actually. Alexander's admission hit Isabella like a physical blow, though she couldn't understand why. We were engaged for 2 years. What happened? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, watching Vivian work the room with practiced ease. I discovered she was more interested in my bank account than anything else. She made the mistake of assuming I was as empty as she was. Isabella studied his profile, seeing something vulnerable beneath the controlled exterior. Is that why you think all women are after your money? Alexander turned those intense blue-gray eyes on her. Aren't you? The question hung between them like a challenge. Isabella felt the weight of the room's attention, the whispered conversations, the barely concealed speculation about who she was and what she was doing here. If I were, she said quietly, I would have said yes when you first offered to pay off my debt. I wouldn't have thrown coffee on you. No, Alexander agreed, something shifting in his expression. You wouldn't have. The moment stretched between them, loaded with unspoken understanding, until the orchestra began playing and couples moved toward the dance floor. Dance with me, Alexander said, offering his hand. I don't know how to dance like this, Isabella protested, even as she found herself taking his hand. Then it's time you learned. On the dance floor, Alexander's arm slid around her waist, drawing her closer than propriety dictated. Isabella's hand rested on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength beneath the expensive tuxedo. Follow my lead, he murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. As they moved together, Isabella discovered that dancing with Alexander was like everything else about him, intoxicating and dangerous. He led with confident precision, guiding her through steps she'd never learned but somehow managed to follow. You're a natural, he said, spinning her out before drawing her back against his chest. I have a good teacher, Isabella breathed, suddenly aware of how closely they were pressed together, how his hand had moved lower on her back, how his eyes had darkened as he looked down at her. Around them, other couples danced, but Isabella felt as if they were alone in their own bubble of heated awareness. Alexander's thumb traced small circles against her spine, and she found herself leaning into his touch despite every warning voice in her head. Isabella! Alexander's voice was rougher now, his control slipping just enough to let her see the man beneath the mask. What? She whispered, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her right there on the dance floor, in front of all these people who would judge and whisper and tear her apart. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it thrilled her. But then the music stopped, and the spell was broken. Alexander stepped back, his mask sliding firmly back into place, leaving Isabella feeling exposed and breathless. We should mingle, he said, his voice professionally neutral once again. Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. As Alexander guided her toward a group of business associates, she caught Vivian's eye across the room. The other woman's smile was razor-sharp, and Isabella realized with growing dread that her reaction to Alexander hadn't gone unnoticed. She was falling for him, and everyone could see it. Worse yet, she was beginning to suspect that might have been his plan all along. 3 weeks had passed since the gala, and Isabella found herself settling into a dangerous routine. Days spent managing Alexander's schedule, attending meetings where his competitors tried to decode their relationship through stolen glances and whispered speculation. Evenings in his penthouse, sharing dinners that felt too intimate for mere business arrangements. She was losing herself in the illusion, and she knew it. Isabella. Alexander's voice cut through her morning reverie as she organized his calendar. Cancel my afternoon appointments. We're taking a trip. Isabella looked up from her laptop, surprised by the unexpected warmth in his tone. Where are we going? Somewhere important. Alexander's smile was different today. Softer, almost vulnerable. Trust me. 20 minutes later, they were in his Bentley, driving through parts of the city Isabella barely recognized. When they finally stopped, she found herself staring at a small community center in a neighborhood that money had clearly forgotten. Alexander, what are we doing here? Instead of answering, he led her through glass doors into a bustling space filled with children's laughter. The walls were covered with colorful artwork, and the air smelled of fresh paint and hope. Mr. Alex? A chorus of young voices erupted as a group of children spotted Alexander. Isabella watched in amazement as his entire demeanor transformed. The cold businessman disappeared, replaced by someone she'd never seen before. Hey, troublemakers, Alexander grinned, accepting hugs from kids who barely reached his waist. How's the art project coming along? A little girl with pigtails tugged on his sleeve. Come see! We finished the mural! As Alexander was dragged toward a bright wall painting, Isabella stood frozen. This wasn't the man who'd bought her debt, who controlled her life with calculated precision. This was someone who genuinely cared, who'd clearly been coming here long before she entered his world. He's been funding this place for 5 years, said a soft voice behind her. Isabella turned to see an elderly woman with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. Started right after his sister died. Said she would have loved seeing kids create art. His sister, the woman nodded sadly. Leukemia. She was only 16. Alexander was devastated, blamed himself for not being able to save her with all his money. That's when he started coming here, working with kids who reminded him of Emma. Isabella felt something crack open in her chest. Emma? She had the same green eyes you do, the woman observed quietly. Same fire too, from what I heard. Alexander's never brought anyone here before. Isabella watched Alexander help a shy boy with his painting, his voice gentle and encouraging. Every assumption she'd made about him, every wall she'd built to protect herself, crumbled in that moment. Isabella? Alexander appeared beside her, a child's handprint in blue paint decorating his expensive shirt. Ready to go? The drive back to his penthouse was quiet, both lost in thought. Finally, Isabella broke the silence. Why did you show me that? Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Because I wanted you to see that I'm not entirely the monster you think I am. I never thought you were a monster. The admission surprised them both. No? Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. Then what did you think? Isabella studied his profile, seeing past the marble perfection to something raw and human underneath. I thought you were lonely. Alexander's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. And now? Now I think you're terrified. Of what? Of letting anyone close enough to leave you again. They'd reached his building, but neither moved to get out. Alexander stared straight ahead, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. My parents died when I was 22, he said quietly. Emma was all I had left. When she got sick, I threw everything at it. The best doctors, experimental treatments, anything that might save her. Nothing worked. She died holding my hand, telling me it wasn't my fault. Isabella's heart shattered for the young man he'd been, desperate and powerless despite all his wealth. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't. Alexander's voice was sharp. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, it's understanding. Alexander finally looked at her, his eyes vulnerable in a way that made her breath catch. Is it? Before Isabella could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made her blood run cold. Vivian Ashford. Meet me at Café Luna in an hour. We need to talk. V. Isabella's face must have betrayed her shock because Alexander immediately tensed. What is it? Isabella hesitated, then showed him the message. Alexander's expression hardened instantly, all vulnerability vanishing behind his familiar mask. "You're not going," he said flatly. "Yes, I am." Isabella's chin lifted stubbornly. "She can't hurt me, Alexander. You don't know Vivian like I do. She's vicious when she feels threatened." Threatened by what? Alexander's silence was answer enough. Isabella felt something flutter dangerously in her chest. Hope, fear, and something else she didn't dare name. An hour later, Isabella sat across from Vivian Ashford in an upscale cafe, feeling underdressed in her simple blouse and skirt, compared to Vivian's designer perfection. "Thank you for coming," Vivian said, stirring her latte with elegant precision. "I thought it was time we had an honest conversation." "About what?" Vivian's smile was razor sharp. "About the fact that you're falling in love with a man who's incapable of loving you back." Isabella's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, darling, it's written all over your face. The way you look at him, the way you soften when he's near. It's almost pitiful." "Why do you care?" "Because I don't want to see you get destroyed the way I almost was." Vivian's mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine pain underneath. Alexander doesn't love Isabella. He possesses, he consumes, and when he's done with you, there won't be anything left. You're wrong. Am I? Tell me, has he ever told you how this arrangement will end? What happens when your 6 months are up? Isabella felt cold dread pooling in her stomach. She hadn't asked because she'd been afraid of the answer. "He's already chosen your replacement," Vivian continued ruthlessly. "A lovely blonde from his legal department, very efficient, very accommodating, very temporary, just like you." "You're lying." Vivian pulled out her phone, showing Isabella a photo of Alexander having lunch with a stunning blonde woman. They were sitting close, his hand covering hers across the table. "This was taken yesterday while you were at your little community center visit. Touching, by the way. He used the same trick on me, showing me his vulnerable side, making me think I was special." Isabella stared at the photo, feeling her world collapse around her. "I don't believe you." "Then ask him." Vivian's voice was almost gentle now. "Ask him what happens when your contract ends. Ask him about Caroline Mitchell from legal. Ask him if you're anything more than a temporary distraction." Isabella stood on unsteady legs, the photo burned into her memory. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because, unlike you, I survived Alexander Blackstone, and I'd hate to see what's left of your heart when he's finished playing with it." As Isabella walked back to the penthouse, Vivian's words echoed in her mind. By the time she reached Alexander's front door, she'd made a decision that would change everything. It was time to ask the questions she'd been too afraid to hear answered. Isabella found Alexander in his study, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city. The setting sun cast his silhouette in sharp relief, and for a moment, she almost lost her nerve. Then she remembered Vivian's cruel smile and the photo of him with another woman. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Alexander turned, his expression unreadable. About Caroline Mitchell?" Isabella watched his face carefully, searching for any flicker of guilt or surprise. There it was, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes. "What about her? You tell me." Isabella stepped closer, her heart hammering. "Is she my replacement?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those piercing blue-gray eyes. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously soft. "Who told you about Caroline? Does it matter? Just answer the question, Alexander. Am I just a temporary distraction until someone better comes along?" "Better?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Define better, Isabella. Someone who fits into your world. Someone who won't embarrass you at your fancy parties. Someone who won't throw coffee on you when you're being an ass. Is that what you think this is about?" Isabella felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. "I don't know what to think anymore. You show me your vulnerable side. You take me to meet children who adore you. You dance with me like I actually matter. And then I find out you're already planning my exit strategy." Alexander moved toward her with predatory grace. "And what if I am? What if Caroline is waiting in the wings? What would that mean to you, Isabella?" The question hung between them like a blade. Isabella felt the weight of everything unsaid, all the moments that had felt real, all the touches that had set her on fire. "It would mean I was right about you from the beginning," she whispered. "It would mean you really are the cold, calculating bastard who destroys everything he touches." Alexander's face went perfectly still. Is that what you believe? I don't know what I believe anymore. The words exploded from her, months of confusion and longing and fear pouring out. You've turned my entire world upside down. You bought my life, my apartment, my job. You own everything I am. Do I? Alexander stepped closer, his voice dropping to that dangerous purr. Do I own your heart, Isabella? The question stole her breath. She stared up at him, seeing the man who'd held dying children's artwork with reverent care, who'd shared his deepest pain in a darkened car, who'd looked at her like she was something precious and breakable. Yes, she breathed, the admission tearing from her soul. Damn you, yes. Alexander's control shattered. In one swift movement, he cupped her face in his hands and crushed his mouth to hers. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of months of suppressed desire and unspoken need. Isabella melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with everything she had. This was what she'd been afraid of, what she'd been running from, this consuming fire that threatened to burn away everything she thought she knew about herself. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. You want to know about Caroline? He said roughly. She's everything you said, polished, appropriate, safe. She'd never challenge me, never surprise me, never make me feel like I'm drowning and flying at the same time. Then why? Because I'm terrified. Alexander cut her off, his voice raw with honesty. You want to know the truth? I set up that lunch with Caroline because I was trying to convince myself I could replace you, that what I feel for you is just temporary insanity. Isabella's heart stuttered. What do you feel for me? Alexander's laugh was shaky, vulnerable. Everything I swore I'd never feel again. Everything that scares the hell out of me. Alexander, I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words seeming to tear from his throat. Hell, I've already fallen. And it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has left me. Isabella felt tears spill over as she reached up to trace his face with trembling fingers. I'm not going anywhere. You will. Alexander caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest, where his heart hammered wildly. When you realize what loving me really means, when you see how possessive I am, how controlling, how fucking damaged. Isabella silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and understanding into the contact. When they parted, she smiled through her tears. You want to know what loving you means to me? It means seeing past the walls you've built to the man underneath. It means fighting for us even when you're too scared to try. Isabella, I love you too, you impossible man. I love your arrogance and your vulnerability. I love how you try to save everyone but yourself. I love that you're brave enough to let me see you break. Alexander's composure crumbled entirely. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair as his shoulders shook with suppressed emotion. I don't know how to do this, he whispered against her neck. I don't know how to love someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. Isabella held him fiercely, this powerful man who'd brought her to her knees, and then lifted her higher than she'd ever imagined possible. We'll make our own rules. Alexander pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears, and something that looked like hope. What about your contract? Your 6 months? Isabella smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Tear it up. I'm not your employee anymore, Alexander Blackstone. I'm choosing to be here because I love you. And if I mess this up? If I hurt you? Isabella stood on her tiptoes, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. Then we'll fight about it, make up, and try again. That's what people who love each other do. Alexander's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. In that case, Miss Crawford, would you do me the honor of having dinner with me? Not as my assistant, but as the woman I'm completely, desperately in love with? I thought you'd never ask. Isabella laughed, feeling the last of her walls crumble. As Alexander led her toward the dining room, Isabella caught their reflection in the darkened windows. Two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen love over fear, who were brave enough to rewrite their own story. Outside, storm clouds were gathering, but Isabella wasn't worried. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. After all, they'd already survived the hardest part, admitting they couldn't survive without each other. 3 blissful weeks had passed since that night in Alexander's study. Isabella had moved into the penthouse officially, not as his employee, but as the woman he loved. Every morning she woke up in his arms felt like a miracle. Every shared glance across a boardroom table a secret promise. She should have known it was too perfect to last. "Alexander, we have a problem." Patterson burst into the penthouse office where Isabella was reviewing charity proposals for the foundation they'd decided to start together. His face was pale, his usual composure shattered. Alexander looked up from his laptop, instantly alert. "What kind of problem?" Patterson glanced nervously at Isabella. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Whatever it is, Isabella stays." Alexander's voice brooked no argument. "We don't have secrets anymore." Patterson swallowed hard. "The Whitmore Industries deal. They're threatening to pull out unless Miss Crawford is removed from the equation." Isabella felt ice form in her stomach. The Whitmore deal was Alexander's largest acquisition in 5 years. A merger that would cement his company's dominance in the tech sector. "What do you mean, removed?" Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. "They've heard rumors about your relationship. They're concerned about your judgment being compromised by personal entanglements." Patterson's words came out in a rush. "Sir, this deal represents $2 billion. If it falls through, then it falls through." Alexander's response was immediate. "Absolute." "Alexander, no." Isabella stood up, her heart breaking even as she spoke. "You can't throw away everything you've built for me. Watch me." Alexander crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Isabella, I don't care about the money." "But I do!" The words exploded from her. "Don't you see? This is exactly what everyone said would happen. I'm destroying your career, your reputation." "You're saving my soul," Alexander said fiercely. "Money doesn't mean anything without someone to share it with." Before Isabella could respond, Patterson cleared his throat apologetically. "Sir, there's more. The board has called an emergency meeting. They're talking about a vote of no confidence." The blood drained from Alexander's face. Isabella felt the world tilting sideways. A vote of no confidence meant the board could remove Alexander as CEO of his own company. "When?" Alexander's voice was controlled, but Isabella could see the storm building behind his eyes. "This afternoon, at 3. Alexander checked his watch. "That's in 2 hours. Sir, if you were to issue a statement about Miss Crawford, perhaps explain that your relationship was purely professional. Get out." Alexander's voice was soft but lethal. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." Patterson fled, leaving Alexander and Isabella alone in the sudden silence. Isabella stared at the man she loved, seeing the weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. "You have to do it," she whispered. "Do what?" "Issue the statement. Tell them we were never involved. Save your company." Alexander's laugh was harsh. "And lie about the best thing that ever happened to me. Never." "Alexander, be practical." "Practical?" He spun to face her, his eyes blazing. "Was it practical when you threw coffee on me? Was it practical when you chose to challenge me instead of begging? This is different. This is your life's work. You are my life's work now." Alexander cupped her face in his hands. "Don't you understand? I spent years building an empire thinking it would fill the emptiness inside me, but it was just a monument to my loneliness. You changed everything." Isabella felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "But if you lose the company, then we'll build something new, together." Alexander's thumb brushed away her tears. "I love you more than money, more than power, more than the approval of small-minded people who think love is a weakness. What if I can't live with being the reason you lost everything?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Then you never really knew me at all." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. She saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't just about business. This was about whether she trusted their love enough to weather the storm together. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed Victoria Sterling. "Take it," Isabella said, wiping her eyes. "We need all the allies we can get." Alexander answered, putting the call on speaker. Victoria's crisp voice filled the room. "Alexander, darling, I just heard the most ridiculous rumor. Something about you choosing a woman over your company?" "It's not a rumor," Alexander replied calmly. "Good Lord, you really have lost your mind." Victoria's tone was half admiring, half exasperated. "Well, if you're determined to commit corporate suicide, At least do it with style. What do you mean? I mean show up to that board meeting with Isabella on your arm. Make them look you in the eye while they destroy you. Go down fighting. Isabella shook her head frantically, but Alexander's eyes had taken on a dangerous gleam. Victoria, that's exactly what your sister would have done. Victoria cut him off. Emma never backed down from a fight, and she would have loved Isabella. Don't dishonor her memory by hiding your happiness now. The line went quiet. Alexander stared out the window, his jaw working as he wrestled with the decision. All right, he said finally. But Isabella decides. If she doesn't want to face them, I'll do it. Isabella's voice surprised them both with its strength. If we're going down, we go down together. Alexander's smile was brilliant, proud. Are you sure? Isabella thought of her grandmother, who'd faced every hardship with dignity and grace. She thought of the children at the community center, who looked at Alexander like he hung the moon. She thought of all the small moments that had led them here. The coffee, the dance, the first time he'd held her like she was precious. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. At exactly 3 o'clock, Alexander and Isabella walked into the boardroom hand in hand. The assembled board members, 12 of the most powerful people in the city, fell silent as they entered. Gentlemen, ladies, Alexander's voice was calm, controlled. I understand you have concerns about my leadership. Alexander, Charles Whitmore, the lead investor, stood up. This doesn't have to be difficult. Simply end this liaison, and we can move forward. No. Alexander's response was immediate. Isabella Crawford is not a liaison. She's not a distraction or a temporary lapse in judgment. She's the woman I love. And if that's a problem for you, then I suggest you find another CEO. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Isabella squeezed Alexander's hand, drawing strength from his unwavering conviction. Mr. Blackstone, another board member spoke up. Surely you understand that your personal life affects the company's reputation. What I understand, Alexander interrupted, is that a man who can't fight for what he loves isn't worth following into battle. And business, gentlemen, is war. Isabella looked around the room, seeing fear and calculation in equal measure. These people had built their lives on compromise, on choosing safety over passion. They couldn't understand a man willing to risk everything for love. The vote, Charles said coldly, is called. All in favor of removing Alexander Blackstone as CEO. Isabella held her breath as hands slowly rose around the table. 6, 7, 8. It was over. But as they walked out of the boardroom together, Isabella realized something extraordinary. Alexander was smiling. You just lost your company, she said, bewildered. How can you be smiling? Alexander stopped in the hallway, pulling her into his arms. Because I just won something infinitely more valuable. I won the chance to build a life with you, free from all the expectations and limitations that were suffocating us both. But Alexander, Isabella, his voice was soft, certain. Do you trust me? She looked into his eyes and saw not defeat, but liberation. Not loss, but infinite possibility. Yes, she breathed. I trust you. Then trust this too. Losing that company was the best thing that ever happened to us. Now we're free to become who we're meant to be. As they walked out of the building together, Isabella realized he was right. The storm had broken, but they were still standing. And sometimes, that's all the victory you need. 6 months later, Isabella stood in the doorway of what had once been an abandoned warehouse, watching Alexander direct the construction crew with the same commanding presence he'd once used to run board meetings. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the skylights, and the air buzzed with the energy of creation. The art studio goes there, Alexander pointed to the far corner, and the computer lab on the second floor. I want every child in this neighborhood to have access to both creativity and technology. Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with pride. The Blackstone Crawford Foundation had grown from a dream into a reality that exceeded even their wildest hopes. What they'd built together was worth more than any corporate empire. Mr. Alex, a familiar voice called out. Little Maria from the community center came running toward them, her pigtails bouncing with excitement. Is this really going to be our new building? Alexander knelt to her level, his expression gentle. What do you think? Big enough for all your masterpieces? It's like a castle. Maria spun in a circle, her arms outstretched. Can Miss Isabella teach us to paint like the ladies in fancy dresses? If she wants to, Alexander looked up at Isabella with those blue-gray eyes that still made her heart skip. "What do you say? Ready to corrupt young minds with your artistic rebellion?" Isabella laughed, joining them on the dusty floor. "I think I can manage that. But first, we need to make sure this castle is fit for princesses and princes." As Maria ran off to explore more of the space, Alexander stood and pulled Isabella into his arms, heedless of the construction workers around them. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly, his forehead touching hers. Isabella pretended to consider the question seriously. "Well, I do miss the marble floors and designer clothes." Alexander's face fell for just a moment before he caught her teasing tone. "Minx." "But," Isabella continued, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly, "I wouldn't trade this for all the penthouses in Manhattan. We're building something real here, Alexander. Something that matters. We're building something that will outlast us both." Alexander agreed, his voice thick with emotion. The sound of heels clicking across the concrete interrupted their moment. Isabella turned to see Vivian Ashford approaching, looking oddly out of place in her designer suit among the construction chaos. "Well, well," Vivian said, her voice lacking its usual venom. "So this is what noble poverty looks like." Alexander tensed beside Isabella, but she placed a calming hand on his chest. "Vivian, this is unexpected. I imagine it is." Vivian stopped a few feet away, her gaze taking in the organized chaos around them. "I came to see for myself what could possibly be worth throwing away everything we worked for." "We?" Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. "Poor choice of words," Vivian conceded. "What you worked for, what I tried to claim as mine." Isabella studied the other woman, seeing something different in her usually perfect composure. Vulnerability, perhaps, or regret. "Why are you here, Vivian?" Isabella asked gently. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of children who'd gathered to peer through the windows at the construction. "Because I wanted to apologize." The admission hung in the air like a foreign concept. Alexander stepped forward protectively, but Isabella held her ground. "For what? For trying to poison you against him? For assuming you were like me, someone who could only see love as a transaction?" Vivian's smile was self-deprecating. "I was wrong about both of you." "Vivian," Alexander began, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've spent the last 6 months watching what you built here, following the foundation's progress. Do you know what I discovered?" Isabella shook her head. "I discovered that I never loved you, Alexander. I loved the idea of you, the status, the power. But Isabella," Vivian's gaze shifted to her. "Isabella loved the man who plays with children and funds art programs and gives up everything for the people he cares about." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected honesty. "I also discovered," Vivian continued, "that I've spent 5 years being bitter about losing something I never actually wanted. It's a special kind of hell, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone." "So why are you telling us this?" Alexander asked, his voice softer now. "Because you deserve to know that what you have is rare, and because—" Vivian hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. "I have something that belongs to you." Isabella recognized the letterhead immediately. Whitmore Industries. "Charles had a change of heart," Vivian explained. "It seems losing the most innovative CEO in the city wasn't as smart as he thought. The tech sector has been asking questions about his judgment, and investors are nervous. He wants you back, Alexander. Full control. No questions asked about your personal life." Alexander stared at the envelope without taking it. "And you're delivering this because Charles asked me to. He knows I'm one of the few people who understands what he threw away." Vivian's smile was genuine for the first time Isabella had ever seen. "He's hoping I can convince you to forgive his monumentally stupid decision." Isabella looked at Alexander, seeing the conflict in his eyes. This was everything he'd worked for, handed back to him on a silver platter. "What do you want to do?" Isabella asked quietly. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the construction site, at the children's faces pressed against the windows, at Isabella's supportive expression. "I want," he said slowly, "to tell Charles Whitmore that I already have everything I need." He took the envelope from Vivian, and without opening it, tore it in half. "Alexander," Vivian gasped, "do you have any idea what you just turned down?" "A chance to go backward," Alexander replied calmly. "I'm not interested in reliving my past when my future is standing right here." Isabella felt her heart overflow with love for this incredible man who kept choosing her, choosing them, choosing the harder path, because it was the right one. Besides, Alexander continued, pulling Isabella closer, we have our own empire to build now. The Blackstone Crawford Foundation is going to change more lives than any tech company ever could. Vivian shook her head in amazement. You're completely insane. Both of you. Probably, Isabella agreed cheerfully. But we're insane together, which makes all the difference. As Vivian left, shaking her head but smiling despite herself, Alexander and Isabella stood watching their dream take shape around them. You know, Alexander mused, I should probably thank you for throwing coffee on me that day. Oh, you should definitely thank me, Isabella grinned. Best worst decision I ever made. The best, Alexander agreed, spinning her around in the dusty sunlight. Though I have to ask, if you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still do it? Isabella looked around at their chaotic, beautiful, imperfect new life. At the children would benefit from their foundation, at the man who taught her that love was worth any risk, at the future they were building together from scratch. In a heartbeat, I'd throw coffee on you every day for the rest of my life. Alexander's tasting. Around them, the sounds of construction continued. Hammers and drills and the excited voices of children planning their futures. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was infinitely better. Because sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the ashes of what you thought you wanted, watered with coffee and tears and the kind of love that changes everything. And as Isabella and Alexander stood in their castle of dreams, surrounded by the chaos of new beginnings, they both knew this was just the start of their greatest adventure. After all, the best love stories never really end. They just keep getting better. The end